Welcome to the Fundraising Elevator, where we're all headed up. This podcast is a production of ElevateNonprofit.com, an online learning platform for fundraising event professionals. We're coming to you today from the studios of the AV department. Please welcome our hosts, Kristen Steele and Samantha Swaim.
Welcome to the Fundraising Elevator. We're here with Robert Goman, who is our guest today to talk about being a guest, which is, I think, something that we don't talk about enough.
It's true.
Which is when we are producing fundraising events, we have a room full of people that we've gathered and we're trying to motivate them and move them to get involved in our mission. And you've been involved in the nonprofit sector for so long in so many different ways.
Yep.
You are so generous with your time and giving back. But one of the key ways that we come across your engagement in the nonprofit sector is often as guest. Mm-hmm. And we wanted to invite you here today to talk about what engages you, what keeps you coming back, what gets you involved. And so welcome to the Fundraising Elevator. We're glad you're here.
Thank you for having me. I'm so excited. I feel very special because
you are special.
I would get to see this now, actually be here with you.
It's happening in real life.
It's happening in real life.
Well, welcome.
Yeah.
Let's introduce you to everybody who doesn't know you like we do. Robert spent over 2 decades at Nike, elevating visibility for LGBTQ plus athletes and employees through his leadership, activism, and shepherding of the Be True brand. He is currently leading his own nonprofit, Sports Equality Foundation, and that supports LGBTQ plus athletes, coaches, and leaders across the spectrum of sport.
Yes.
He is a board member, has served on many event committees, and the most important role he has played is donor and guest and many, many fundraising events. We see him all the time. We're so glad you are here with us.
Thanks.
It's not that the other things aren't important, but there is something very interesting in being able to be in a feedback loop with somebody who understands all of those pieces and can synergize them to come back and say, so I'm thinking.
Let's talk about it from this perspective.
Yes. So big picture, from the guest perspective, what makes a great event?
That is a really great question. And there's so many answers that go with it.
Right? There are.
I think what makes a really great event from the very beginning is I look at everything from a branding standpoint. Like what is the mission? How is the mission translating to draw me in?
I love you said that.
And how is that story connecting further than just what's written on paper? And I think often we get stuck in a mission, a vision, a purpose,
a talking
point.
Yeah. And
we don't use the human connection of how to bring people into that part of our story. And for me, it's, you could go down a rabbit hole of it's a theme, it's certain things, it's food. But for me, it's really been more about connectivity and community.
Yeah.
And how can I feel being a part of that in a way that makes me feel good as a guest and as a donor, but also that I'm doing something different that may not be in the sphere or the part of the community that I actually live in every single day.
Yeah.
So that it can take me into a different space. And I always find that part really exciting.
I love that differentiation because I think you attend a wide spectrum of events. So you're very, very enmeshed in some organizations in your board service and what you're doing with them and your leadership capacity. So the event becomes an extension of that. So you walk in knowing so much already about the work and what those pieces are. But you also, people specifically seek you out on their friend invite list because you are a great guest at these events. So you come to events where you have no idea what who the organization is, what that work is. And so I love that you're able to sort of bring that full spectrum of attending to the table, because I think often people are just like, well, if they know us, they know us.
Yeah.
I love what you just said because I like to be surprised. I like the moment of kind of being uncomfortable in a minute because I don't know how this event works. And I like to be surprised when it's really good.
Yeah.
And I was like, wow, I didn't see that coming.
Or watch the train wreck.
Or watch the train wreck. and sadly, been to a couple train wrecks.
Yeah.
And you try to make them as fun as possible, because if I'm there as a guest, I either want my host who's hosting me to feel that I'm participating.
Yeah.
Or if my husband and I are hosting, we want to make sure our guests are feeling that same way. And it can be really fun and it can be really terrifying at the same time. It just depends on who you've cast for your guests with you to enjoy that moment.
I love that you're like curating your guest experience with who's at your table in that way.
100%.
I love that.
Because you don't want someone to just be like, I don't get why I'm here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And, so myself and my husband, we look very often at how do we cast those guests with us. But I also like to feel like I'm playing a role for someone else if I'm a guest of theirs, and how that comes across. And like I said in the beginning right now, it's just, I love to be surprised.
I want to know what some of those surprises are.
New venues.
Okay.
So places that I have not been, how they operate and work. And I know we've had this discussion. I was recently with you at something.
Yeah.
And I was like, this room looks really different than when I was here for the event. And you explained it to me and I was like, wow, magic. It really was magical. And so it's those transformative moments. And everything doesn't have to be like on blast.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
We just attended an event in New York City recently.
It looked very fun and fancy.
It was something I'd never been to before. And I didn't have a high expectation, but when I left, I was like, that was so fun. And our guests that we brought with us all had a great time.
Amazing.
And we got to meet people and interact. And it was a surprise, frankly. It caught us off guard a little bit. But it was also something we'd obviously never been to an event like that in New York. And so it felt really good to be participating in the community.
Yeah.
But also seeing how an event like that ran with a bunch of volunteers.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Well, I think you just tapped into a number of things.
Okay.
Connection and community.
Yeah.
The value of the relationships, and both the relationships you come to in the organization before you even arrive at the event, but the relationships you bring and then the people you meet there. So I think we undervalue the fact that gathering isn't just about the spectacle, but often is about like how we connect to each other, the humanness. You also tapped into mission-centered themes. And I am so glad you did, because you and I both like a good theme. Like, you and I have been to many events where the theme has just been the thing that like pulls us in. It's like we have the costume and the look and all of that. But the mission-centered themes to me are how we better immerse people in our work. And, if we're a housing and homelessness organization and our theme is cabaret, we're missing that opportunity sometimes to look at how can our theme actually immerse people in what we do, and how do we get creative in that? And I know that sounds like far-fetched, like, oh, we're gonna have a housing theme, and it's like, we can, let's think about what a house is and a home, and how do we make this event a home. One of my favorite sort of theme stories around housing is one of our organizations is a furniture bank that supports groups after they are able to secure housing for folks. Because if you don't make your house a home, keeping in your home is hard to do. And their number one need that they had requested was silverware. And so we served dinner with no silverware to give everyone that moment of just simply like looking around and thinking, what am I going to do? And it was a bowl of soup. So that was even more awkward. Like, people are like, do I pick it up? Like, what do I do? And they're like trying to flag down their waiter. And we started the event with the explanation that one of the most requested items is a very simple item, and started the event with the story of the silverware. So I love that you said mission-centered themes, because I think it's just a way that we get to experience people's missions.
I think also in that you mentioned, like when you said cabaret and, houseless and things, things that are needed. I'm like, sometimes also think through what how does your theme really connect as well. And starting with your mission theme is always a good place to start. And as a guest, like I said, I want to kind of put me in an awkward position. Make me think.
Yeah.
Make me take pause for the real reason that I'm there and what's going on.
Yeah.
It's come up a couple times already, and I have known this to be true. And knowing you, what I really love that you're bringing to the table is that guesting is actually an active experience.
Oh, 100%.
Yeah.
And I don't know that planning thinks about that. So when active planning and active guesting come together, that's the magic sauce.
Yeah.
When the lean in is coming from both spaces to achieve a third space, that's the magic. When we just assume a flat screen, not literally, but metaphorically, for guests to come in and throw attention at and then leave, we've missed an opportunity to have them think of us after. And I love that you as a guest have expectations of my organization and my event. And you are actively curating an audience in your table if you're hosting a table, or you're thinking about how to participate as an audience at someone else's table. And I just don't think organizations think about that. We get very flat about it. We're like, Robert and Jeff have bought a table.
Who's
Great.
your guest list?
Please give me your guest names by April, blah, blah, blah.
Correct.
And I just hammer the heck out of you to get your guest names so that I can get them in the database, so that I can get the bid cards printed, all of that thing. But am I actually looking at that 10 top and thinking about what is the experience? Who are these people? What is that? There's an activation we have to think about in guesting. And that's a note for us.
Yeah.
That's not a note for our guests. That's a note for us.
Yeah. Thinking about how our guests guest.
Yes.
And how they engage.
Yeah.
Well, you said the importance of sort of the curation that you're bringing together. What is it that makes you say yes to even be willing to do that? Like what brings you in to say, yeah, I want to be a part of this. I'm willing to invest both in buying the table and also invest in hosting and being a part of the magic.
Often I think about who I know who is involved with organization. Relationships.
Yeah.
The communities that they're serving, and where eventually do those 6 degrees connect to me and or those that I know in my world. Also, who's working on it, who's committeeing it. I applaud anyone who joins a committee for an event and the work that they put into it. And because I find that their passion is why they're there to be a committee member, and therefore translating that back to me as a guest on why they would want me to attend or have you as their guest. So I think all of those things kind of like coalesce together in how that works. I also really like the idea of being able to connect back to an organization. And Kristen, you just brought this up, like you got to fill 10 spaces. And I'm like, I've got 8. And I want to be able to reach back out and say, I have 2 spots. Who's on your list that isn't coming, but would come if they had a seat?
Yeah.
Or who in your organization do you serve that should have a seat and feel like they're a part of this magic moment or this moment that they can receive and feel. And so I think it's a lot of factors. It's kind of like a little bit of a puzzle in finding that magic twist of, okay, it all links in, because once it does, you can have a really great time. I also like putting people together that they're going to all walk away with something.
Yeah.
And then the collective is larger.
You're a curator.
I'm a curator.
You definitely know how to curate groups and people. And I mean, you do this in your own like house party gatherings that you host. But when you and Jeff, your husband, sit down and have a conversation about, this event's coming up, we need to get a ticket to it. Is that typically because you received something in the mail, or is it a phone call that you received, or is it because you're that deeply involved in the organization of the event? Like, what are the determining factors to say?
So it's all of those things.
Okay.
I've gotten, actually, I won't say from whom, but recently a phone call, an email, would love to have you. I'm impressed when a ED or a CEO of an organization reaches out and says, I would love to have you. Here's who else is attending this event that you know, which I think is really, I don't want to say clever, but clever.
It's valuable.
It's valuable.
You're going to understand your experience better.
And I also know who the audience is there, or the other guests, and that, you know, who you're comfortable with and why. There are very few that I think we just like pick out of the, you know, see it posted online, or, you know, this is coming up. It's pretty much always because we either know someone that's been involved, or we've heard about how great the event is, and you kind of want to be a part of it.
Yep.
And there's some that I've heard a lot about, and I've gone. I was like, oh, that's interesting.
Is this really the greatest event?
This is not it, but I have a nice watch now.
Yes. Yes. Well, I think that speaks to, I think there's still a lot of stock invested in, we're going to sell all these individual tickets.
Right. The marketing out.
The marketing out, and that being the source of engagement. And what we're hearing time again, and especially from you today, is it's those relationship pieces.
Yeah.
And how are we in this moment at this? When
I want to add to that too, that I do think a lot of organizations invest a lot of money in, like, we need posters everywhere, we need billboards, you know, but the reason why people come are those relationships. But you're doing something that we talk about a lot, which is, how do you curate a targeted list of table hosts, and those hosts bring an audience for you, that you understand the assignment, and that you understand that as a table host, you want to think about a mix of guests there. We very often see organizations skip that step of thinking about their table host, because 10 asks to 10 table hosts can be 100 people at your event, right? Instead, they're thinking, I got to sell 100 tickets, I got to sell 100 tickets. And the inverse of your time into those 10 relationships can actually yield a deeper investment in your work. Because when I come as a guest to your table, I give because I know you're giving, right? You influence me to give. So I think that is an important element when we think about the marketing, because it's not just about pushing it out. It's about, who are we pulling in?
Yes.
A collective of a bunch of people, individuals, sometimes doesn't create an energy.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's right.
It just creates individuals.
Yeah.
And so to the point of focusing in like a pyramid of table host, you know, supporters, your sponsors, your table hosts,
yes.
your point, that can then curate groups of people and allow you to have interaction with them as well. As like, who do you have on your list? And there's been times where we have friends who are hosting tables as well.
Yeah.
And so we will go back and forth and like, who do you have? Who do you have?
Right.
And you have scratch that one out over here with so-and-so and so-and-so. But we're all looking as table hosts or guests to bring to life that experience for everyone that's, you know, committing an evening and committing their own personal dollars for giving at some point. I also don't go in with a big expectation that everyone's going to give.
Right.
I try to stay
You encourage it.
I encourage it. Yes, I try to stay in communication with my guests and be like, if the auction is already visible, here's what's coming up for auction. There will be a giving ask opportunity. Please feel whatever works for you. So reminder, if you have a company match, all these different things.
Yeah.
And that's just from my own involvement.
Right.
But it also, as a table host, makes me feel that I'm responsible for those other 8 people at our table, and that they're comfortable and not knowing how this works.
Right.
We had an organization this past year, it changed their event plan from a 500 market out to the whole world to 25 table hosts. And they talked about it that way. They stopped talking about it as a 250 person event. They talked about it as 25 table hosts that were mostly board. Their board, I think, is like 15 deep. So they had each board member was a table host, and then they had some key major donors that they reached out and solicited. And then they spent all their time, they didn't do any marketing. There was no like invite or anything. They spent all their time just working on a curated strategy for who they were filling those tables with. And they had a little list of key donors that they would say, we're looking for a place for these donors. Is there someone that has an open seat at their table? And they doubled their money last year and cut their costs.
Well, what's interesting to me that I don't think organizations are doing so much. So they're literally just like, let's achieve butts and seats. But I think you can create a vibe.
Yeah.
In the room with who's in the room.
By thinking about who's in the room.
By thinking about who's in the room. And I think people undercut themselves in working with, let's say, you and Jeff as table hosts to say, what do you need? How can we support you? What are you missing? What do you need to know? Which sort of leads into my next question, which is, if we're setting the stage for the event, which people don't do,
show up.
If they come, then the event will happen. And that is true. But you can actually enhance the experience at the event by what you've set up for people in advance.
Correct.
What, as a guest, do you expect and need in advance to really sort of walk in and not have all kind? Like, if the event is creating question marks just given content or experience, great. But I shouldn't have you walking in going, can I eat? So
is there food here?
What are the pieces when they're hammering you about a guest list that would actually be more helpful for you to be able to walk in and go, I know what's expected of me?
Yeah. I think it's like logistics.
Yeah.
I want to know, well, basically we know where the location's at. I want to know where's the best place to park.
Yep.
What is the right time to arrive? Kind of I don't need to know the full run of show.
Right.
Like at 8:22, we're going to do this. At 8:23, the lights go down. And like, I just need to know cocktail hour, light apps, sit down for dinner. In that time period, what's kind of rough show, show of what's going to happen, post, exit. So that I can wrap my head around how to engage myself for the evening, as well as those that I feel responsible for in coming as my own guests. And I think oftentimes that gets skipped.
Yep.
And there's nothing worse than being a guest and walking in and kind of going, I kind of don't know what's next,
right?
Or what should I do? And
there's a psychological safety issue, right? Like, if you don't know what's expected, it's like, I'm not participating.
Yeah. And I applaud things like, as a guest, I've been communicated to that I can pre-register. My information needed for a credit card, all that information's in there to make your check-in experience will be easier. If you do this, there's all the things. There's an app. Give me all the ways to make my experience easier.
Yep.
And I will deliver who's going to sit at my table. And there have been a few experiences where that hasn't happened. And within the first 30, everyone's gonna be like, don't invite him. First 30 minutes, if it's not jiving for me, I'm just like,
oh, me too.
When is this gonna be over?
And that, I don't know if this is for you, this works the same way for you. That impacts my potential philanthropy at
100%.
your event. It's not a one-to-one. Like, it's not even sometimes a mental thought that I'm like, I'm going to take this out on them in this moment. But my experience, I'm either building on that arc with you, or I'm like digging a trench underneath it and not willing to come up for air. Yeah.
Well, we've also been at those parties where that's happening and it actually becomes the topic of the party instead of the topic of the mission, the organization, the work. Right. It's like, oh, this is a shit show.
Yeah.
I
literally sat there going like this, and I'll be vocal and just like, people can hear you. I'm like, no, don't do that. No, oh, you're going to do it. No, they did it. And then you just feel like, And I feel bad because I'm like, who are they working with? or did they not listen?
Yeah.
And I think it's organizations, and I know this through your work and being around folks, like, let's throw an event. Let's raise money.
Yeah.
It's easy. No, it's not.
It's not.
It's not. Or else we'd be going to events every day.
Yeah.
Well,
true.
we started this work because so often what we were experiencing is a nonprofit would go to someone else's event and they would say, oh my goodness, they raised $1 million.
Yes.
And you know what they did? They had roses on the table and they served us steak. So we're going to do that and we're going to raise $1 million. And they walk in and there's 30 guests in the room, not 500. And they raise $14 and they are like, but we serve steak. And we were seeing that over and over. And so we started this work because it was like, no, there is strategy. There's relationship at the center of what we're doing. There's storytelling. I mean, that is just such a critical thing for the guests to be able to have the best experience and to be able to engage and participate in the intended event versus the behind the scenes. What is happening?
Right. But they serve steak.
Right.
So does Sizzler. I mean, you think they have to eat just like that. It is a very, it's really interesting because, yeah, depending on the organization or the event, the food can play a big part. We've talked about that before, right?
Absolutely.
But then again, the food can play a part that you're like, oh.
Unanticipated consequences.
Wow. So 500 people just ate that. That
was disappointing.
That was okay. And then go to a surprising event that we just went to, and I was like, it was a steak. But it was a really good steak. And surprisingly, everyone really enjoyed their dinner.
Yeah.
So it's how all, it is that balance
creating
of how
magic.
Creating the magic and how it all goes together. And I do applaud folks. I think it's really simple. But also it's risk taking when you're not focused on what your outcome needs to be.
Well, I think it's shifting what we mean by simple to, simple and easy are not the same. And what is actually simple is teeing my guests up for success by communicating to you in advance and giving you the information you need so that you can frame the experience of like, is this an apps thing? Am I going to have to find dinner after? Is this my whole day? Is this part of my day? What am I asking people to get into? That feels simple to me. Getting that calm together, getting it vetted, do all that thing, that might not be easy within your organization. Right. But how do you like pre-event? Because there's a lot of conversations. How do you pre-event? How do you like to be communicated to by the organization?
Email.
Yeah.
Okay.
Is pretty good.
Great.
A consistent email. Kind of like
on a cadence.
On a cadence. Yeah, I was going to say something that has there's repetition.
Yeah.
But there's new updates.
In case you missed it.
Yes.
Yeah.
And don't tell me the same thing you've told me 15 times.
Right.
Give me just
tweak it a little.
Tweak it a little bit and check spelling and grammar. And just little, and
that's her favorite thing.
Well, and I'm like the worst person at that. But it's when I do notice it, I was like, did you mean
that's wrong.
11 p.m. or 11 a.m.?
Right.
Like that's your whole run of show. And like that does not match that. So like it tells me that you're rushing and you're not focusing in on it.
Yeah.
But those cadence of communications of, hey, we're really excited about this, or here's an update.
Yep.
This is what's going to happen now, or just want you to know that I also enjoy a text if I'm close enough to an organization or their development team or someone. You can text me whenever. I've recently had a development leader actually just call, sent a text and said, hey, can you chat? I was like, oh God, what happened? And it was just to have a conversation about some future thinking.
Oh, nice.
And I was like, it is an organization I'm still very connected with. And I love that person felt comfortable enough to come back and say, hey, what do you think?
Yeah.
And it's the circle. It's the full circle. And even when you're participating as a committee member and or a guest who is a guest who is a repeat guest, let's say, I think organizations should think about how to reach out to them and say, yes, there was a post survey XYZ, but I'd like to take you to coffee, or I'd like to get on the phone with you and just give me your raw thoughts. We're in a tight circle, trusted space, because most people I think will just go, oh, it was great. I really had a good time. But then they walk away and they're like, oh my God, I went to this event.
And when they invite me next year, I might not go.
Right. I don't know if I'm going to go back. It wasn't.
Help them.
Yeah. So help be a voice.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And so I really appreciate those that can connect that way, because that's what it really is. It's a responsibility to stay connected to your guests, and everything we're talking about is super exciting with, focus less. I want to say this. Dale said it. Less is more.
Yes. Less is more.
That goes across everything.
Everything. Yep. Yes.
Right? When he said that recently with y'all, I was like, it is so true.
Yeah.
When you invite me in, you're inviting me in.
Yeah.
Typically, right?
Mm-hmm.
You've been invited into this world, to this space, to this organization, to be a guest in this moment.
Yeah.
Don't Cirque du Soleil me. Like,
right.
It's just like, I'm so overwhelmed with what's going on. And then there's there's so many presentations and too many talking heads.
Yes.
Okay,
so many, the parade of talking heads.
I heard you talk. And I heard and then, it's a political year, so everybody wants to talk. So they march out and then I'm like, okay, so when are we getting to the point of why we're here?
Right. Mm-hmm. Well, I want to take a pause and come back and talk about that. Okay. The point of why we're here, those moments within the event that bring you in and engage you. Because ultimately, I think, we're trying to move people to get more invested in mission. So we'll be right back with Robert Goman, guest extraordinaire on the Fundraising Elevator.
The Fundraising Elevator is recorded at the AV department in Portland, Oregon. For years, they've been our trusted partner, delivering exceptional audio-visual production and videography for nonprofits. In 2020, they transformed into a dynamic live streaming studio, producing more than 900 virtual and hybrid events. Now, we embark on an exciting journey together to bring you this podcast. Seeking the best in live events, video production, and live streaming, we proudly recommend our friends at the AV department. Link in the episode description.
Welcome back to the Fundraising Elevator. We're here with Robert Goman. Robert, you've been involved in planning a lot of events. You've been involved on a lot of committees, a lot of boards, but you often are a guest, and not just any guest, but a guest that really participates. And I think that is valuable and an opportunity for the planner to start to think about, how do I design for my guests? So we've talked about what brings you into the event, what sort of inspires you and connects you at the event. Let's talk about the event itself.
Okay.
Yep. Before the break, you said less is more.
Yeah.
So big picture, when you're at the event and you're like, this is great, I'm really engaged, I'm feeling really inspired, what is your advice to an event planner about the things that they should be focusing on so that their guests have that reaction?
I love this question. And I love this question because of my former background working in the corporate space in retail.
Yeah.
And I look at it as like a consumer journey. So what is the guest journey from pre-event, engagement with the event, post-event?
Yeah.
And in those moments, I think it is about, how do we feel comfortable in moving from one space to another? And to answer, I think, the question more succinctly is, everything needs to connect.
Yes.
From your bright poster, your bright card that gets put in the mail needs to connect to the next step that connects to the next step.
Yeah.
And how those thread together. They all stitch together to the final piece.
Yeah.
And often I'll say it this way, when they do, it's so seamless.
Yeah.
Right? And it feels so good. And you're like, I get it. I went on a journey with you as a guest.
Yes.
So there's like, if you look at it like an amusement park ride. Okay. So if we're a small world, you get it. You're in your little boat. And then there's some events that are like the Matterhorn. You're like, you're this way. And then you're this way. And then you're up. And then you're down. I'm like, how am I connected? Or how are all those things feeling connected? And that can go from, and I want to say it this way, it's guest-centric. It's not, well, the drapes match the flowers that match the napkins.
Right.
That's all lovely. That's additive.
Right.
But if the story isn't connecting to the theme and the theme
Yes.
and the story aren't connecting to the mission, it's kind of like, how do you expect me to connect as a guest?
Yeah.
And so, does that
Yeah,
make sense? I mean,
absolutely.
It's from the moment I arrive or we arrive, just how does it seem seamless?
Yeah.
I don't want to know. I don't want to go behind the scenes.
Yes.
I don't want to see what's behind the curtain.
Your event is a single story. And in
Correct.
that like narrative that you're telling, it starts when you get the invite and it ends when you're out with friends afterwards talking about the event a month later, right? Like that story continues and has a single arc. So often in the nonprofit sector, we have so many influences of, I want to speak at your event. I want to be involved in your event, that we kitchen sink everything. You know, it's like, we're going to have that and the kitchen sink. It's
not salad.
Right.
Well,
right.
Not only is it
Right.
not salad, but you talking about pulling back the curtain, our guests aren't dumb.
Right.
And you actually showcase dysfunction within your organization on some level with some of that complete disconnect. Or you can tell when a whole program's been built and an organizational speaker, executive director, board member, or whatever, drops in with this tangential right turn that you're like, oh, who's not on page here? So when you walk, if you've had all of your optimism and all of your work and cultivation as a guest and you show up and all of a sudden they pull back the curtain of dysfunction and what's happening, your trust level as a donor, I mean, we keep saying guest, but let's really name it what it is. As a donor in the room is diminished.
Yes.
Just like that.
Correct.
When you cause somebody to have to expend extra energy on what's happening, instead of, lean in.
Yes.
Then you're never going to get that back. And I think we forget that events are sometimes the one time a year we have to literally bring donors physically both together, but into our work.
Yeah.
And if we're not doing either of those things, either amazing vibe in a room and they all had a great time. We don't know what happened up here and we didn't raise money, but at least they leave with that.
Right.
But if that doesn't happen and nobody's connecting to your mission, like it just, we just don't think about that. That's what's actually happening. You have one shot this year.
Yeah.
Potentially.
And often that gets overlooked.
Yeah. It does. And I think that we see it show up in ways that are just like regular routine moments at events, which are things like, are you guys able to find their way? Like that's one of the number one things, especially when we're in a convention center, a casino venue. Like, are you able to get to the event? When you get there, is it easy to check in or are you standing in line for 2 hours? When you arrive, are the staff relationships you have and the board relationships you have greeting you? Or are they running around with their hair on fire? And then when you get there, are you able to like navigate your way easily into the room and to the bar? Or are you standing at a like conjunction point where no one can get past it? Is it clear to take your seat, to have your dinner, to have your meal? Or is it like half the room is eating and half the room is doing other things? And then does the program start on time, have a concise flow? My number one issue in programs is when there's a start, stop.
Tell us your feels about that,
So
Robert.
many things to talk about with that.
So
Samantha.
many things.
Number one, I'm still shocked people can sit down on an airplane. They get on and people are doing this. I'm like, they're numbered.
Right.
ABC.
1, 2, 3.
1, 2, 3.
Uh-huh.
Front to back. But people are like, no, 24, 25, 26.
Okay, I did recently get on an airplane and sit in the wrong seat and hold up the departure.
Okay, wow, there, that throws my whole navigation
Keep going.
off.
I'm still with
Right.
you. I'm still with
So
you.
to
Keep
your
going.
point about when you come into an event space, a ballroom, whatever it is, they're all different.
Yeah.
All you know is I'm table 22.
Right.
Where is that?
Right.
We recently went to see a show here in Portland in a theater that I had been to, the Aladdin. We've gone to the Aladdin. Jeff had never been. But, you know, it's not like you know exactly.
Right.
That's why they have ushers.
Right. Yes.
So if you think about a Broadway show or you think about entering a space, there's always someone to help. And I love what you said about who's greeting you.
Yes.
Welcome. I think seeing board members visible and sharing, like being a part of the action is super important.
Yes.
And it helps solidify the commitment
Yeah.
that they have to the organization and their guests as well. And the team. And if everyone's running around with their hair on fire, that doesn't help.
Right.
But entering that space, there's always a sense, no matter if you've been to an event repetitively year after year or off and on, that there's that one moment of kind of you're overwhelmed.
Yeah.
It's a big room. There's a lot of tables, and it's
You got to get oriented.
That cattle call.
Yeah.
Know, bing, the bell. Ding, ding.
Uh-huh.
Dinner is being served, and everyone's going in, and you're trying to find your people, but you're trying to find your table number. So having folks help.
Yes.
You get there, specifically in a very large event. Because we all lose our minds at some point, especially if you've been at a happy hour prior and having a good time.
Yeah.
And those, as we know, serve well as a guest to go then in and then continue on your evening and enjoy. So I think making all those senses, like I said earlier, connected, but also easy.
Yeah.
Especially for for large scale events, because it's easy to kind of get overwhelmed and lost. More so for people who haven't attended.
Yeah.
So I always try, if I have a guest who hasn't, to try and find them during the pre-party and just say, checking in. We're at table XYZ. I typically, as a table host, will also go into a ballroom before to help people navigate. But it is really nice to walk in and someone has a paper and says, what table? Can I help you find your table? You're like, table 22. Like, you're right over here in the back.
Yeah.
Great.
Yeah.
Super, super helpful. So take down as many hurdles
Yes.
I guess would be the way to say it, that will help them enjoy and want to connect and be part of your story.
We always recommend to organizations that they have a MC. Because I think the MC, similar to reading any good story or being, a viewer of a movie, your MC is your narrator.
Yeah.
They are the person that is holding the audience's hand and saying, come with me, we're going on a little journey. And they keep the connections moving forward. As soon as you remove the MC, you have someone who is nervous to speak, gets up, they finish, they walk off stage, and then everyone's like, now what? That the MC is the continual thread all the way through. Because I think that is respectful of the audience's time and attention, in that there aren't gaps, there aren't, moments of what is happening, that it is a clean understanding that this is the next transition, that this is the next person, that this is the next thing. And I always think that it is in the same way that wayfinding is helpful to the guest being ready to participate. I think that the MC is helpful to the program connecting to your audience.
Yep. I think that is so important.
Yeah.
And that goes back to my thread issue. That is someone who from the beginning, you feel welcomed. You feel that this person is now going to guide you through your evening. Right. And the up-down point that you made is going to feel less clumsy and less disruptive.
Yep.
Yeah.
And you start to get to know them, and their personality starts to shine through on why they're there as well. And they have a responsibility to take you through that. And it does make the evening as a guest much more fun.
Yeah.
It also makes me a fan for you in the right way.
Right.
Right.
Because I'm like, oh, yay, so-and-so's back up.
Yes.
And you're like, I'm in this pattern. I know what's going to happen. If it is literally TBD the whole program through, I'm a fan for you, but I'm a fan in that moment of you and I turn into the peanut gallery where we're rooting for the car crash.
Right. Oh, yeah.
And that's when you start going, oh no, they didn't. Oh no. But people can get on that train pretty easy of, there's a reason why the This American Life episode about the Peter Pan catastrophe performance is like their most listened to episode because it is literally
the whole thing went wrong.
They point out the moment where the crowd turns against the whole thing and is, and I think people forget that energy in a room has to go somewhere.
Yeah.
There is energy in that room. It has to go
It's
somewhere.
either going the right way or the wrong way.
Yeah. Energy is a big topic as a guest.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because going back to kind of the less is more
Yeah.
piece, if I'm in a room if you want me in a room as a guest for 5 hours,
3
you
arguments
better,
against that, but
Yeah.
yes.
No, but you know where I'm
Yeah.
going. Then you better really have it scripted out. That's going to keep me engaged for 5 hours.
Yeah.
And if not, reduce.
Yeah.
Don't even recycle. Just reduce.
Yes.
Reduce your run of shows. Stay focused. Because especially if there's something that is a post event that's going to happen after, you're at a point like at hour 3, like, I wonder what time. I wonder if my other friends are here yet.
Yeah.
Maybe.
Yeah.
Or you just lose people altogether.
Or maybe I'm just going to head out.
Yeah.
Well, and as a guest, or I'm going to head out. I've got other things to go to, or what am I doing tomorrow? And this is where you start to see when that energy starts to drop, the person I always feel the worst for is the auctioneer.
Yeah.
Who's trying to pull the energy, and the MC who's trying to keep that energy going because they have X amount of items.
Yeah.
I still have 10 items I've got to get through.
Like, look, here's my suggestion to people. If you're a guest and it's going long, always bid at the last few items.
Oh, yeah.
Because you can probably, I'm not saying you should go and get a deal,
but they're a deal. Yeah.
it could happen.
It could happen because everyone's like, I'm out.
Yeah.
But it's like guest exhaustion.
Yeah.
You've exasperated the room.
Yeah.
And that's not fun for anyone.
No,
It's not. Let's talk wow. So Robert came to the Elevate conference to ask people to think a little bit out of the box about the wow factor at an event and what that can be. Can you talk to us a little bit about how you define the wow and perhaps an example of that in an event and what that could look like for folks?
Okay. For me, it kind of goes what I said earlier. I like to be surprised. So, wow, you caught me off guard. I didn't see that coming. I didn't expect that. Wow can be big and bold. It can be also super intimate and quiet. And I think people don't think, when they think wow, it has to be big.
marching band.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, clearly, I love a marching band. I'll lead the parade. But I think about moments, and if I'll refer to a couple specifics.
Yeah.
There have been moments of events where I've been to at the art museum that have had wow. And you wanted that wow because it really celebrated kind of the vibe that was going on. And there were, things and lights and streamers. Decorations that all went together. And then there are moments like, I will never forget Jimmy Harrod singing. And you're just like, mesmerized because the script of the evening took you to a part where this amazing voice production also linked to the story. And just it captivated the room. And it's so there's that was a wow moment. But even in that kind of turn where it kind of comes to this quiet space, it then creates this next energy that's transitioning you to the next space. So it's I think when I think about wow, it's like, what do you want to create when and where in the moment? And that can be from, wow moments can be from how you arrive. What's the step and repeat? And there's, I love going to, you want your photos taken because you've dressed up as a guest. You've taken some time to get ready. And there's 500 people for dinner. There's a beautiful red carpet. There's a step and repeat. There's one photographer.
Not wow. That's not wow.
That's wait. Wait your turn.
Stand here and wait.
Right.
Yep.
So intent.
Yeah.
Right. Think about all those things. And then what are the next steps? What's the next wow moment? And if you're moving through multiple spaces, what are those wow moment energies? I think about a wow moment for me this past year was taste. Equity.
Yeah.
Right?
Taste for Equity.
At the Avenue.
Yeah.
Never been. And the moment of arriving somewhere new,
Yeah.
the ease of checking in and being moved into the tent. And I was just like, oh, give me a minute.
There's a lot going on.
There's a lot going on.
Yeah.
And I was, in a moment, as a guest, I'll say, a little uncomfortable. But as I started to catch the vibe and the energy, I got swept up in it. And it did its thing. Does that make sense?
Yeah,
It
totally.
took on a life of its own. So it guided me. And at that point, then I, as a guest, all those
settled into it.
Settled into it. And you're eating and drinking. The music's happening.
Yeah,
everybody's having a
so
great
for
time.
context for guests that haven't been to this event, the first hour is 10 chefs and 10 wineries all doing tastes and past food. There's a live band. So it's a lot at once, right? You're like, we want you to taste everything. Go.
Which we know, for those of you that were at Elevate, and we talked about this, Kitchen Killa was at Taste.
Yes.
They were also at Elevate. And one of you introduced me.
Yes, Chef Kiara. We love Chef Kiara.
And I was like, you were at Taste.
Yes.
You did the green tomato. I'm like, I didn't even like tomatoes, but I remembered that moment, which was distant in time from one another.
Right.
And from one big, very overwhelming moment to a very personal, connected moment. But again, the wow lasted enough for me to remember what that was and connect it over. So I think wow doesn't always have to be big and bold.
Yeah.
Right.
It can be surprising. It can be experiential in a way that feels very personal as well. I mean, I'm wowed if I get either a handwritten note at the end or a phone call that someone's taken the time to do that and reach back out. So it doesn't always have to happen in the event moment.
Yes.
It can happen throughout your journey for what you want your guests to experience.
How often is the wow associated with fundraising for you? Like, what does the fundraising moment feel like to you? Especially like if a goal is hit or it's a really good auctioneer or not a good auctioneer. Like, how does that factor into the like emotional connection and the celebration for you?
I love nothing more than being caught up in a room where the energy in fundraising suddenly goes off the charts.
Yeah.
And you start looking around and it's going and it's going. And I look at it this way, and I say this very complimentary to those that I know that are standing up there as auctioneers and that I applaud for their work. When it becomes easy for them, the work is amazing.
Yeah.
They're not having to pull out of the room. They're letting the room, they're just adding.
Yeah.
Right? Because that energy build. And as a guest, you may not be the one at that level, but you can cheer them on.
Yep. Absolutely.
And I love it when it starts getting like, if there's specifically like a piece or an experience that people are bidding on.
Yeah.
And it's going back and forth and it starts to go from, 10 people start and then it gets down to 5 and then it's just down to the 2. And they're like.
To the death.
Or they stop even raising their paddle. They're just looking like, just a nod.
Just a head nod to the auctioneer,
And the auctioneer knows. And that there's something, it's electric.
Yeah, it is.
And then when it happens.
There's like an explosion in the room.
An explosion.
Yeah.
And everybody feels like we all participated in something special in that moment. Even though we, and I
cheered them on.
Well, what we actually experienced was that whole room believes enough in the mission that can happen.
Correct.
That you have funneled all of that energy into that. And while that's a very small amount of that room bidding in that moment, everybody understands why they're doing that.
Yeah.
And that changes the room, and that energy begets more and begets more. So when you're laying the path to that track, that's the work.
And that is so important because, as we started in the beginning, when the train wreck does happen, when that path has not been planned or laid out, and that moment happens and you're at the cliff and the ask goes up, there's nothing worse. It could be a room of 20. It could be a room of 2,000.
You just told your audience, don't trust us. There's no trust here.
When that moment happens of silence, it immediately, it's like taking a balloon and going, until someone can
and then you get, often sometimes it's worse than silence. You get I don't want to call it a pity card, but kind of.
Yeah.
You get somebody who's like, I've got to stop this.
Right.
And one sort of lone person tries to step into the space, but it's already happening.
So I'll say this. It's not the guest's responsibility to do that.
No.
Correct.
It's not.
It is the organization's
Yes,
planning
that's
responsibility to make sure
That's
that place, that moment in time is as scripted and planned
Yes.
as possible.
Yeah.
And there's nothing more exciting that even though it's scripted, we all know that.
Yeah.
We all know there's pre-commits and things like that. When there is someone who else is so inclined to give
To
at
be
a
moved.
level,
Yeah.
to be moved and to give. And it becomes, again, the energy starts to build.
Yeah.
And is there, I love the moment. Is there anyone else? And then a card goes up and you can almost see, like, if you know the DD, the development team, they're like,
What? Who's that?
Who was that? Or sometimes even those of us that go to events will be like,
Yeah.
Oh, they're new. Who are they? You know? And it's also, it even goes within, from a guest experience, furthermore, of how teams are also working with their sponsors and who are they collectively bringing to the table.
Yeah.
And what is those experience? It's no different because that gift has already been given.
Yeah.
But they're now bringing together a group of people. And this is where, from a sponsor guest standpoint, which I've been a part of as well, you want your value as a sponsor to feel of value to what's happening.
Mm-hmm.
So again, they all stitch together.
Yeah. So you just tapped into something that reminds me of the Derek Sivers TED Talk. He did this very short TED Talk that was, I think, 3 minutes of how to build a movement in 3 minutes or less. And it's this video that went viral, you may have seen, that is up at the Gorge Amphitheater, which is a big outdoor music venue. And it's a guy dancing shirtless in the field by himself. And very quickly, the whole field participates. There's this like surge. And what happens in the moment is that one lone nut is doing an activity that is sort of, what's that weirdo over there doing? That gets a follower who participates, and that follower shows 2 more followers how to participate. And once they have 4, it hits a tipping point where everyone else sitting there watching wants to join in, and there's a risk of them being an outsider if they don't. And you watch the entire stadium suddenly flood to this moment and start to dance. That is what it is incumbent upon the development team to do going into an event, is to orchestrate that they have the lead gift, that they have the follower, that they have 2 more folks to join, and that they hit a tipping point so that that moment can happen, that the room energy can be fed. As soon as someone doesn't raise a paddle, it's like a sense of distrust. And as a seasoned guest, someone did their work.
Sorry.
As soon as you name a top level and no one's there,
right.
We all know that.
Yeah.
We're like, whoops.
Yeah. I've been a part of enough organizations and spending time with you all to help coach some folks. And if you're missing those gaps, there are ways that you can put things together to make those gaps fill.
Totally.
If that makes sense.
Yep.
And often those get overlooked. But your idea is that seamless feel, that vibe begins and continues.
And is all connected.
And is all connected.
Yeah. I mean, that's the quickest way to lose your connection.
It really is.
Yeah.
And I love your point of the amphitheater piece, because you've already come together. You've come to a space around something for a reason, whether you've been asked, you have a feeling about the organization, you're a supporter of the organization, you're connected to the mission somehow. But once you're in that moment, the job is to maintain everyone's energy.
Yeah.
Connect them further.
Yeah.
And leave them with something that when they go away, they felt, I had an experience. I learned something new today that I didn't know about. And wow, I'm really glad that I went, because the work that this community is doing, and I felt I was a part of something tonight.
Yeah.
So that's the good experience.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's hopefully what your audience, I mean, we talked about what gets you there. We talked about the experience in the room. When you leave the room, hopefully what you're doing is you've created a culture where your guests are now sharing it with other people and feeling like this was something important they were a part of.
Right.
What about when it goes wrong?
Is this where the elevator goes down? Yeah. I often don't even like to think about it for organizations because it can be pretty drastic.
Yeah, pretty detrimental.
Detrimental to your work.
Yeah.
And you can just feel, I mean, I've had it happen. I've been a guest and I've just walked in and I'm like,
yeah.
And it can be, one thing can happen that if it's that bad, then nothing else can make it better.
Nothing
It's
else
like
works.
a ripple effect.
Yeah.
Right?
Yep.
And then you leave, and if you are someone who's hosted a group of people, then you feel you have to apologize to your guests. I hope, or, how did you feel about it? And some people are like, oh, it's not what I thought. Oh, okay, well, typically I can't make an excuse for an organization on an evening, but I think it is detrimental because again, it's like anything. If you're going to go and tell 5 or 6 people, hey, what did you do Friday night? Oh my God, we went to this event and it was like they ran out of wine.
Our phones blow up on those nights. We don't even have to be there.
You don't even have to be working on. You don't even have to work on the event.
The texts start.
It's like another friend we have that if the food's not right, they get a text.
You bet.
Could be.
We know about it
across the U.S. and still text that person and be like, "This food is not great."
Yes,
obviously, should
it's
be
true.
Involved. So, it is true, and I think, like I said in the beginning, people think it's easy. If it was easy, they would be happening all the time. And it's not. And the detrimental piece of that is that it's hard to repair and come back from that.
Yep.
Yeah.
And oftentimes organizations will also work with an organization or a company like
a planning team.
And plan an event, and it will be successful. And then the next year they're like, we can do this on our own.
Which I love it when they can.
Yeah.
But they can't.
Well,
Most of the time.
Well, I think sometimes people, they miss the time allocation.
Yes.
Yes.
And I think it's remembering that events are high stakes.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So if you don't have the time allocation and you don't have the investment as an organization to put into it to do that work to make it successful, I honestly think not having the event is better because you don't actually have to go back and do that repair. You can have some key conversations. I can call Robert and say, I know we have this annual event. We've done an audit as an organization. We're really going to invest our time and energy in a much smaller curated event this year. Yeah. We would love you to be a part of that.
Correct.
My guess is all of a sudden you go, I like that. That's interesting to me. Let's keep talking. As opposed to me inviting you to a half-assed thing that we didn't do the work on and you leaving going, wow, where did I just do with 5 years?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And now I've got to explain it to other people. It's high stakes, but it can work. And so it's about figuring out where the time and attention goes.
We have a lot of organizations that get trapped in the mantra of, but we've always done it that way, so we have to. Like we always have our gala every October.
Just listening right now.
Yeah.
And not watching this on YouTube. We got the squint
from
Robert.
The side eye from Robert. But we've always done it that way just traps them into this feeling of being beholden, and they can kind of spin if they don't have the time allocation, if they don't have the resources. Yeah. So we've been really, I think, excited to see how in the past couple of years, technology, rethinking how we gather is kind of inspiring people to break out of, but we've always done it that way.
I think it's great.
And to think differently.
I would love to go to an event. I'm just going to put this out in the universe.
Yes. Let's make it happen.
Let's manifest it.
It's just different.
Yeah.
Maybe it's not tin tops. Maybe it's curated sofas and soft seating, and you're sitting in like these little pods of groups of people, and there's just a different vibe and shape to how an evening feels, and how we are engaged, or how auctioning is done. And different things. I think we get to the got to have so many people in the room.
Right.
We have to sit them at tables. We have to get wine donated.
Yeah.
We have to have appetizers. We have, it's just.
We get into a checklist.
We get into a checklist versus what is the thing that's going to kind of throw things off a little bit, but achieve a lot of the same ways and make it fresh.
Yeah.
And I think when, I said earlier, it's like think about your brand. Think about your organizational, your brand. If you're not moving the work forward for your organization, your reflective energy moment needs to also move forward with your organization.
Yeah.
And if you're just doing the same thing here in this moment, then you're missing something. And so there's ways for that to feel different. I love the idea of smaller, intimate events.
We're seeing a lot of that right now. It's kind of dreamy. People are raising more that way because people are more connected, more invested. It's more of all the good things you talked about. It's a richer engagement with each other. It's less logistics to have to manage. You get to have a curated experience, both with the people and around the food and the beverage and the entertainment. I'm a big fan of folks thinking a little bit outside of that box and thinking about how could this be something that's really curated and specific to what are we trying to achieve by bringing people together?
Yeah,
I
agree.
Well, we're going to take a short break, and when we come back, we're going to get on the fundraising elevator.
All right.
Love it.
Loving the fundraising elevator, but wondering how you can talk to Sam and Kristen? Well, now's your chance to do it. Book one-on-one consulting time with Swaim Strategies experts Sam, Kristen, and Mary, and get all your event questions answered. Our team has you covered on strategic planning, fundraising strategy, storytelling, data tools, and registration support. Get the tools and the help you need to make the most impact at your fundraising event. Book at elevatenonprofit.com. The link is also in our show notes.
Welcome back to the Fundraising Elevator. We are here with Robert Goman, who we love for so many reasons, but it's because he's an amazing guest that he is here today. He has a lot to say about that experience. He's also an amazing donor, and those are fused for him. So he speaks from a really rich place. You volunteer, too. All of these things. Been on boards. You've been on committees. You've sort of helped shepherd toward events. What makes for a great committee experience for organizations when they're thinking about engaging volunteer committees to be involved in their event? How can they make that experience better for their people?
I appreciate the fact that you said volunteer committee.
Yeah.
Because this is people giving their time
Mm-hmm.
to an organization because they believe in the mission. They believe in the organization. They've maybe been involved for many years.
Yeah.
They are looking for community.
Yeah.
There's many reasons why people volunteer their time. So first and foremost is for the organization to appreciate that these are volunteers or that you are a volunteer. Often times people volunteer because they feel they have something to give or provide and a point of view.
Yeah.
I typically approach it from a guest point of view. An experience. And I think there are two roads you can go down. Road number one is you can appreciate your volunteers. You can be very clear on their time commitment. You can be very clear what you're looking for from them. You can give them a specialty space or an area of their expertise that they can blend into the event. That's why they're there. And you can most certainly just appreciate the fact that they are willing and able and wanting to provide you time. I also think if you're hosting a meeting, you give an agenda. You start on time.
Right.
Yes.
You know, all the things so that people know you've set those expectations up front. So that's one road. The other road is not feeling appreciative. There is nothing more frustrating as a volunteer that you're being asked to volunteer. You show up and the organization leading the meeting is not organized. And they're kind of discombobulated. Or you would say something like, well, 2 weeks in our meeting 2 weeks ago, we talked about X. And the organization says, Did we? And they kind of nod up, look up, like, yeah, nobody was taking notes, or someone wasn't, taking in a way, or the fact that as a volunteer, you are sharing the reason why you're there. What if we did what if we did? And you get and Samantha kind of said that, well, we've done that before
Mm-hmm.
and that didn't work. Okay, well, there could have been a number of reasons why it didn't.
Right.
So maybe we rethink it, or what can you think about again? But I think the biggest thing for me as a volunteer is in working with an organization, you're being asked to give your experience, your time, and voice.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Listen to it.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I have better things to do.
Yeah.
Yep.
If you're not going to listen to me, then why am I here?
Yeah.
As a volunteer. You've asked us to come together. And I've been on a couple of committees where they've been fun. You're having a good time. That committee then becomes a sense of energy
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
that then perpetuates itself through the work,
And that's
their guests,
the best case scenario.
who's coming,
Yeah.
getting people excited, talking about it with folks in the community, et cetera. And then there are those that get frustrated, like, yeah, don't ever ask me to do that again.
Yep.
So volunteers are important, and volunteers are key to the success of a program and how they work. And the committee space, you're not, as a committee member, being looked at to chart the whole thing out.
Right. No. But I have been on committees that have asked that. And that is the train wreck of a committee. We have to raise $500,000. We have a date and we know we want 500 people in the room. Go. Is chaos. There's no clarity. There's no roles. There's no job description. There's no agenda. There's no meeting minutes. There's no appreciation. It's just a lot of people going, what if? And a lot of what's my role in this? And I find that clarity is the key to a good committee experience. Clarity about, this is the box we're building within, right? Here is the budget we have. Here's the timeline we have. And from you, we're looking for these things. Can you engage with in this way before they even enter the room and enter the conversation? So there's an agreement field and almost a job description of, yes, I can help you think about guest experience. I can help you think about sponsorship solicitation, and I will commit to buying a table and showing up and bringing a room full of people. That clarity, I think, then allows me as a committee member to say, I know exactly what my role is here.
Right.
Well, let's just cut to the quick, though.
Oh.
Do you not think that your volunteer committee is going to show up to your event as donors?
Right.
And do you not think that you are showing them exactly how you're going to treat them as a donor?
Yeah.
Right.
In how you're treating them as a committee member?
Yeah. If you're not respecting their time.
If you're not respecting their time, you're not listening to their ideas, you're telling them, yeah, we've always done whatever.
Yeah.
You're not incentivizing them in any way to continue the other part of that arc, which is at the event.
Yeah.
Being an active participant and taking that joy and energy that they're having together as committee members on that planning portion of the event into the room.
Yeah.
Like, they're your ambassadors in the room. I'm preaching to the choir, but it's I understand it's a function of so many hats and overworked and trying to get things done and trying to engage people to take some of that lift. But how we engage people to participate is how it feels like air and just something I want to do, or I'm lifting weights that I never asked for.
Right.
You can create a different outcome by the environment, just like at the event. By the environment you're creating, you can create a different outcome. Anyway, that's my soapbox moment.
No,
for
your
today.
soapbox is perfect. And I'll soapbox with you really quickly. Don't bullshit me.
Yeah.
Don't feed me a line of bullshit.
Right.
Sorry, can I say that?
Yeah.
Yes,
Okay.
you just did, and I love it.
Sorry. Because, again, you're bringing typically folks that have either been working on your board, they're in the community, they're here to
There's
help.
capacity.
Yeah.
There's capacity, and they want to help further.
Yes.
We already know your dirty laundry.
Yes. We're
So
still
don't-
here.
Probably.
And we're still here.
Yeah.
But so don't try to tell me X and X equals X.
Right.
Sorry, I just made a face for those listening.
Yes.
Because there's typically someone in that committee who knows that X and X actually equals Y.
They got
Why?
that phone
Yeah.
call already.
Right. You know, they're like, And I love it, kind of frankly, when a committee member goes, I'm looking over these numbers and something doesn't make sense. And I'm like, you forgot that you have an actuary on your, so, this is what they do all day long. They look at future planning. That's probably going to hit home for somebody who's listening to this later. But it's true. It's just really like make your team feel valued, make them feel valued, make you feel they're participating. And there are some teams out there that do such a great job at that. And I enjoy spending time with them.
Yeah.
But if it becomes a heavy lift and you're not feeling heard.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I have a very big thing about people listening and people hearing.
Yeah.
Yes.
And what you do with the information. Yeah. If people are not being heard, then why are you asking me to be here?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yep.
We hear often from development teams that their committee meetings are full of you should conversations to the development committee, or to the development staff. You should call this person. You should do this. You should do that. Mm-hmm. And I think you should is a symptom of not having clarity of needs, roles, and responsibilities. Mm-hmm. It's not being forthright and upfront about where numbers are at, what the need is, and how an individual can support that. When I've been involved in a committee where there is a clear, if you can buy one table and help me to get Robert committed to another table, that would move this needle tremendously. I'm like, great, that's easy. Let me do that. Yep. Also, here's some ideas I have that I want to bring to the table about the event. That should be a place of being able to brainstorm, bring ideas to the table. All ideas are a good idea. And then sift to identify which are the ones that we move forward with.
Correct.
And I think so often development teams hear a lot of you should because there isn't the work going into the structure. Mm-hmm. And then they cannot absorb the ideas in a positive way. Mm.
Yep.
Can I go back on one thing that Kristen said?
Yeah.
And that was in that thought of going back to less is more.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. And the thought that smaller can be better.
Yeah.
And the teams getting so involved in the minutia that they're losing focus on what is the impact.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're worrying about tablecloths and flowers and axe throwing and who's going to be the 15th speaker of the night.
Right.
And all your time is spent in the weeds.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
You're not spending as a development team because most teams are not big enough to be cultivating your donors and your guest experience.
Yeah.
So that to me, the guest experience and your donor cultivation is your foundation for which you then build upon everything else.
Totally
and oftentimes, as a guest, as a volunteer, and as a board member, you can see when those cracks happen.
Yeah.
Because we're too focused on the what if, the we should
the
do,
weeds.
in the weeds,
Yeah.
versus have you called so-and-so or have you connected with so-and-so?
Yeah.
And then that becomes very apparent in the room. So you, again, your thread that you're trying to do suddenly is like, nope, that it's suddenly not, there's a hole.
Yeah.
Yep.
It's not connecting.
Yeah.
Mic drop. Well, let's jump into the fundraising elevator.
Okay.
You've heard the podcast before. Mm-hmm. We ask everyone to join us in the fundraising elevator to head up to the penthouse where the party is and tell us about a party you went to that was memorable, what made it memorable.
Oh, first of all, I love a penthouse. We need a penthouse party in Portland.
Oh, yes.
I'll have to think about that one. An event that has been memorable. Can I say what it is?
Yeah.
Yes. This year for me, it was the NAA event.
Oh, good. Yeah.
And
so Native American Youth and Family Services is the organization.
We were guests of friends of ours.
Excellent.
They invited us to be their guests, which I love being a guest of someone who's a guest, if that makes any sense to anybody.
Yes.
Because you get to participate in a whole different way. And I use that event because from the beginning to the end of the night, I learned so much more about the organization.
Love it.
Not just as an organization, but as a community within Portland.
Yeah.
A community and how it celebrates itself culturally and allowing me to have space within their culture for that evening was very special. And I didn't feel othered or, for lack of better words, I felt like it was a really special moment.
Yeah.
and celebrating and wanting to be a part of something. And the story, again, the thread of the evening.
Yeah.
Who was there? Who was greeting you? Welcome. Thank you for being here. Having never been, felt really amazing.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
And what I thought about that later is Jeff and I were leaving. I said, what was great about that is we had never been before. We've been to the venue many times from other organizations. We experienced it similarly in regard to arrival, check-in, downstairs, upstairs. So if you know the venue in Portland, Art Museum, how it works. But what I experienced for the first time was, as a freshie, for someone coming for the first time, I felt so welcomed.
That's great.
And there's times where I've gone to events where I've been many times. And I don't feel that welcome.
Yes.
Because they're like, oh, it's just you.
Wow.
Which I'm like,
that's a gift. That's amazing.
So it was a really,
it's never just you.
No.
I mean, look, come on. If I'm putting on a head full of curlers and high heels and dressing up for a grease thing or something,
you betcha.
I'm committed to being there.
You are committed. You are a committed themer.
So I appreciated that moment because they showed, in a way, their organization and the value it adds to the community.
Yeah.
Yep.
Not just of the cultural community.
Right.
The community at
large.
Expansive beyond. So that core of who they are as an organization and the effects and the impact that it has throughout the Portland metro space of impact to everyone. And it was just a great night. It was awesome. Really
memorable.
And memorable.
Yeah.
Love it.
On so many levels.
Love it.
So for those who are planning, you're a planner. For those who are planning an event, let's head down to the basement where the tools are. What is a tool you would recommend that a fundraising event planner has in their toolbox?
Ooh, a tool. Data.
Yes.
Yeah. It comes down to data.
Is that weird to say
No.
that? Okay, and I'm a creative, but data is what to me sells things.
Yeah.
Right?
Absolutely.
There's no dispute.
Yes.
Yep.
And often it's overlooked.
Yeah.
Because we want to get into the what if or the
Yeah.
we could.
Yeah.
You could do a lot. But what does your data tell you? What is the post-event data from the year before or 2 years before?
Yes.
What were your trends? Working with other organizations or working with a company like yourselves, what data we're seeing out there, and listen.
Yeah.
Listen to the data. Because we can often get into we've always done it that way.
Yeah. It's easy to get stuck there.
So I feel like data is a tool. It's used everywhere.
Yeah.
We use it on social media. We use it to measure our clicks. We use it to measure who's looking at the work that we're doing. Data, financially, where are our risks? Where are our rewards? It answers a lot of questions.
Where's our potential?
Where's our potential? And I think often it's overlooked.
Yeah.
And people want to get to my tools are, I know how to make a balloon arch.
Yeah.
Yay. What does that get me?
The number one thing I think I see organizations do is build a budget for expenses and totally miss the budget for revenue.
Yes.
And the idea of, what's our path? How much are we going to raise? Cool, we could establish a number. But what if we actually know who the people are that we think, if they're in the room, could help us raise that? And developing that path is just like a key to success.
It is. And I'm actually surprised at myself that I said data.
Frankly. I love it. Well, I love that you said it because to me it makes it more universal. It's not something that it's one of those things that it's just ubiquitous. It's the water we're all swimming in. And I think when we acknowledge that that's where some of the key wayfinding is for what we're doing, I think it becomes less.
Samantha said, there's times where I love when the report out later comes from an event. They're like, we made $922,000 tonight. Yes. Everyone's excited. And as a board member or whatever, what did we spend?
Yeah.
You bet.
Yeah.
Again, data.
Yeah.
You bet.
What's the balance? And if you're like, we only spent X, so then our take is whatever. So it's quantifying those pieces, and I think often overlooked. So data-informed decision-making
Mm-hmm.
can make your event
honestly can make it so much easier.
And we probably shouldn't do that.
Yeah, we don't need to guess. We have the information.
Right.
Yeah.
It just simplifies.
Yeah.
I love it. So you do so many things for so many organizations and have more recently founded your own. So to wrap us up today.
I should say I'm a founder.
Founder.
I'm one of many.
Yes.
Okay, check.
One of many founders of an organization.
Yeah.
So let's wrap today by you sharing a little bit about your organization and how people can see it and get a hold of you.
Well, first of all, thanks for giving me the space to even talk about it.
Of course, please.
I have the privilege of serving as the board chair for the Sports Equality Foundation, which is an LGBTQ-focused sports organization. It's a national organization. It's my first national kind of endeavor.
Amazing.
You can find us at sportsequalityfoundation.org. And we really aim to find the space for inclusive space, equality for LGBTQ plus athletes. And it is work that, if people know me, know that's been very near and dear to my heart for many years. And it is a space that continues to challenge the world of sports on a day in and day out basis. And decisions are being made constantly on what qualifies an athlete to be an athlete.
Yeah.
And we're seeing that pretty heavily in some of the work that's going on now. So we are working really hard to have really great conversations. We are working very hard as an organization to also reflect the community that we represent. We are working in spaces to educate, to provide opportunity.
Awesome.
To provide visibility and to link people together where they just didn't think they could be linked, frankly. We use the phrase "for your love of sport," and that L, the O, the V, and the E are the things that I just mentioned. And the beauty of it is a organization led by those of us in the community, which sometimes is not.
Correct.
Which is important. And it is not to devalue anything else in the ally space, which is needed, but it is definitely, when you are of something, to speak to it in a whole way and true way, that makes it of value. So that is where we're at. And we are hosting our first event in Las Vegas in October of 24. And I'm petrified. But we're not fundraising.
Amazing.
But you're not fundraising. And you've got it.
Yeah, I feel like you've worked like all of your pieces are coming together in this work, right? I
think so.
It's your volunteer work in nonprofits. It's your event expertise. It's your understanding of the brand and the guest experience. It's your work as an advocate and an ally in the LGBTQ space. It's your work in athletics and a whole career in the athletic industry. Like bringing all those things together. I'm really excited to see where the foundation goes. I'm really excited to see what's next because I think that it's needed. There's so much happening right now and so many attacks happening about folks that just want to be able to do the thing that they're amazing at, and you're creating space and advocating, and that's important. So thank you for doing that work.
Thanks for giving me the space to talk about it.
It's an honor to be in community with you in so many ways. Thank you for all you do. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
The Fundraising Elevator is produced in partnership with Swaim Strategies at the studios of the AV Department. The program is produced by April Clark and directed by Steve Osborne, with audio engineering and original music by Dwayne Anderson and Heidi Christensen. Video production by Chris Peterson, Whitney Gomes, and Nathan Bouquet. Video editing by Steve Osborne. Graphic design by Pendulum Creative Group, and support from Sophia Keller, John Lyles, and Andy Dowsett. Elevate, we believe in bringing people together. Our online learning platform for fundraising events has webinars, workshops, downloadable tools, and more, designed to save you time and stress when planning your next event. We're getting nonprofit, development, and event planning professionals the tools and ideas they need to create events that inspire donors and raise more money. So join us at elevatenonprofit.com. The link is also in our show notes.